everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Accommodation Show. This week, I'm joined by someone who I would deem a friend, Mr. Billy Crock from Hometime. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bart. Nice to be here finally. Long-time listener, first-time caller. So, good to be here.
It's good to hear. Good to hear. Look, we have been at it for over 5 years. I don't know if you know, but it has been a little while, and those years just keep adding up. At some point, we'll get to the 10-year anniversary. But Billy, for those that don't know you, you run a little business called Hometime, and Hometime is actually a business that I've seen punch way above its weight in the industry. That's doing incredible things. And what's interesting about our journey in the story is that I knew of Hometime way before I knew you. And then I met you at maybe an Astra conference 3 years ago. And the next thing I know, we're having a chat. You're super friendly. You're really nice. You're like, hey, what can I do for you, Bart? And it was incredible to see one representation of a business on one hand and having perception of what the business is like, and then meeting the founder and just going, wow, this person's absolutely awesome. So a real testament to what you've built. And it's a real, I guess, honor and pleasure to know you and to have got to know you over the past few years. But look, what we might do is to get us started, if it's okay, can you introduce yourself, let everybody know a bit more about Hometime and what it is that you guys do in the industry?
Thanks, Bart. Very nice to be here, as I said before. And I also consider you a friend, mate. So it's good to be here. Yeah, so my name is Billy Crock. I'm one of the co-founders of Hometime. Hometime is now, one of Australia's largest property management companies, servicing the short-term rental market, HMC, sometimes referred to. And actually, funny you said it's 10 years because it's coming up on our 10-year anniversary shortly as well, which is a bit of a crazy thought. Well, in some ways it feels like 50 years and in some ways it feels like 3 years, like the kind of journey. But we've been chipping away now for a while. I'm sure we'll get into it. The business has taken a few different twists and turns along the way. But we're just focused now, I guess, on, really building actually the tagline is building Australia's largest collection of beautifully curated holiday homes, all of which are managed by a local professional. And we're just trying to build that level of professionalism and consistency, that guests are looking for, I guess, these days, particularly in multiple markets around the country. So that's what we're trying to achieve. But of course, there's daily bin fires and all sorts of twists and turns, as I said before, in between.
Sure.
But I think if I can return the compliment to you, we obviously met at Astra. It was just before you were getting Strive online. And, I think you've done a fantastic job building that ecosystem and delivering an awesome conference. So it was good to be a part of it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Look, my vision and goal has always been to try to help others and to help others through the networks that I have and through the work that I do. And it's incredible how many of the leaders of companies are just so willing to give and so willing to share their knowledge. And I think that it's kind of twofold. One is, yes, they're willing to share, but also they see that there's the return on investment of that is incredible as well. Like that you give, and then you get back tenfold. So I think that's been something that's been great for me and my progression. So thanks. We talked a bit about doing this episode and we talked about different topics. And one thing that I want to go through this season of the Accommodation Show is talking to business owners about how they built their business and how they got to where they are today. Because I think that for a lot of people, it can feel quite unattainable. And especially that sort of feeling of, oh, maybe I'm in it too late or I don't have the right resources and that sort of thing. And everybody has their own unique journey in their own way that they got to where they are. And there's no one set path towards building a business. And you can build a business in many different ways, especially in short-term rentals or in accommodation. Or even we just recently went away and we were talking to staff members that are working in different hotels, and they felt quite constrained by their work. And we're like, hold on a second, there's so much more that you can do and you can build a business around it. So what I'd love you to do is just to maybe start at the end and then we'll go backwards. Can you tell everybody like what Hometime looks like as a business today? Like how many properties, revenue, if you like, whatever you're comfortable with sharing. You give people a bit of context as to what the business looks like.
Yeah, sure. So Hometime today is about 2,200 properties thereabouts, and that's about 140 million ish in gross bookings a year. And yeah, I won't share all of the kind of revenue and margin numbers below that, but yeah, that's in terms of staff where we are about 200 staff, across the country. So uh, that doesn't include all the housekeeping and maintenance
Mm.
contractors and everything else that is around the periphery. But yeah, it's kind of it's a big number in some ways and not so big in others. But yeah, that's when we all get together. That's about the number, and we operate in every state and territory across the country. So that's about 35, sorry, cities and towns. And yeah, we're doing yeah. What's the latest numbers? I guess it's like around 8,000 groups of guests a month or something like that are flowing through the property. So it all sounds like big numbers now, but it certainly wasn't that way. As you said before, uh, it can feel unattainable. I was thinking about the growth story before I jumped on here, and it's like for a long time we were dreaming as well of those numbers and like felt very out of hand. But sometimes you wake up one day and you're like, oh, it's actually moved from 500 properties to 1,000 or whatever those milestones might be. But yeah, that's where the business is today.
Yeah, well, very impressive. And it's impressive being one of the largest in the Australia region. Have you counted up how many guests you guys have had through the doors?
I haven't. I think the team was telling us we've managed, over the years, we've probably managed like closer to sort of 3,500 properties, as they come and go. I mean, we've got this milestone internally. We want to get to 20,000 guests a month, which we hope to get there at the end of this year. And that's actually because our ambition is, there's not many businesses of that sort of scale. Well, there's only a couple or a handful in Australia. And in these type of businesses, like the short-term rental property management businesses, you don't really get any of the kind of network effects or anything that's associated with like an Airbnb or one of the platform businesses. And so our kind of ambition is to get to that sort of 5,000 mark properties initially, and then eventually to like a 10,000 property portfolio. And we hope that at those larger scales, you get some of the network effects that these bigger businesses benefit from, predominantly around like guest loyalty and geographic spread, whereby more guests in property is more kind of people experiencing your product, which leads to more kind of referral growth, repeat bookings. You start to get some of those tailwinds. Yeah.
And the brand recognition, right? That sort of you can do a lot more with it, even from a marketing spend point of view. You can do a lot more because you can target campaigns nationally, even rather being constrained to different locations. But let's rewind now, so we know where you are today. But what was the journey to get to where you are? Where did it all start? Was it an idea? Did you know where you were getting into? How did you start your
No.
journey?
No, my drinking buddy, from university, Dave Thompson, he had the idea, and I thought, yeah, mate, no worries, I'll help you out. That sounds like fun. I don't know if I would have used the same terms knowing what I know now, but yeah, yeah. Anyway, we started the business. Well, basically, the idea I think was around 2015, and yeah, Dave's kind of like finance background, stockbroking. We went to uni together in Perth, in Western Australia. Dave's actually from Zimbabwe. We kind of went on our corporate careers for a while, and then we ended up both in Sydney together, and lamenting our corporate grind over a few beers, which is where many of these brain waves come from. So yeah, anyway, it was in that time. If you cast your mind back, I mean, it's funny because now the fad is completely AI, but back then it was actually like, oh, the business model is Uber for insert blank, like,
Mm,
which is this
yeah.
kind of decentralized local service delivery model, etc. And we were like, oh, we'll be the Uber for Airbnb cleaning. Like, what a great business idea.
Wow. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it it started as just a simple website, where a simple website where Airbnb hosts could connect their calendar link, the iCal link, and it would automatically schedule a clean, right, for when the guests
Mm.
left. That's where we started, and we would go and find a housekeeper and send them over. It was me and it was Dave at the start, so I would rock up in a t-shirt and I looked like
I love that. I love that. I mean, sorry, I'm going to interrupt, but How important is that part? Like, I see so many founders, but actually, there's founders that do it both ways, right? They're like, no, I'm not going to do the clean. I don't want to do that part. But then there's founders who are just like, you know what? To get going, like, we've got no cash, we've got no money, we haven't figured this thing out. We got to roll up our sleeves and we got to go out there and do the work. I know I was talking to another chap, Alex Shapiro from Can Monkey, and I think he was running cans, right? Like going and picking up garbage and taking it to the curb and taking it out to build a business, right? To get things going. How important do you think that part is in terms of for an entrepreneur to be willing to do those things, or can you do it both ways?
I mean, like, well, actually, I think as an entrepreneur, it's important that you're willing, because I think one of the most important attributes of an entrepreneur is grit. And so if you start with the hard work first, or the undesirable work first, and you can work your way through it, it's not a bad screening mechanism, I think. Like, if I was now, say, looking to invest in someone who's growing their business and they demonstrated that they had ground through, some of the harder parts of growing the business, and we're now in a phase where some things are in place, that gives you a lot of confidence. So I think it's important. I mean, yeah, like, I wish we could have like shortcut a few of those early days and years, and but I think it's a good thing to do. I think now, I'm going to jump around a bit, but now, like, we are acquiring some businesses to grow. And I was recently up on the Sunshine Coast with a business that we've just bought and absorbing into the Hometime fold. And it was a Sunday afternoon, and we're having drinks with this business. And it's, of course, it's the staff in the office, but it's all the housekeeping team. It's their husbands and wives and whatever. And so, of course, if I can mingle amongst them and talk about the days of building a cleaning business, cleaning, learning the system, like, you still ask me, like, cool, how do you clean an Airbnb? All right, well, get in there, dust the ceilings, go to the bathrooms, do the kitchen, circle back, vacuum the bedrooms. Like, there's a system that you should be able to execute to do it efficiently. So, like, of course, that's useful knowledge. But yeah, actually, a shout out to Radim, who was a Swedish entrepreneur who started a housekeeping business in Bondi, who I learned the cleaning system from back in the day.
That's incredible, right? Like, that you've got these people that are, I mean, they might not even know how instrumental they were in those different parts, and you pick up different pieces as you go. That's why I do this work. That's why I sit on the Accommodation show interviewing people, because I just learn so much and can ask any question I like, and it's with a view of using that information to help me. Okay, so right, so you're doing the cleaning. Part of the sharing economy, I remember back in the day, I was reading books about the sharing economy, also the circular economy, which is important. And there was a real kind of movement, and that was sort of in the 2000s. And I remember there was more and more talk about it. Then you had all the Ubers and the Airbnbs, and Airbnb, of course, was a completely different platform back there, where it was like, literally, I'd just take my room and host you, and it was all about hospitality in a much different way than what it is today. So you're doing the cleaning, and then what happens from there?
How do we? So, look, we got a fair amount of early traction with the cleaning. Of course, that was, people were looking for that service. So, back then I remember Airbnb was 1 million listings, right? So it just gone past there globally, and it's now like 5 or 6x that. But that was the point where it's just sort of starting to come into the mainstream. And so we got business from showing up at the Airbnb meetups. If you remember those back in the day, where there'd be like 15 or 20 people in a room in a city like Sydney or Melbourne. And so we'd go there and obviously try to pick up people's cleaning business. We got a bit of traction. We were doing that for about 6 months, and then we were coming into Christmas. And one of the bigger property management, who's probably a friend of yours, is Lisa Patterson.
Of course.
Calls me up and goes, "Hey, I've just fired my cleaner. Can you take on our whole portfolio?" Like 3 weeks before Christmas. And I think she was probably running about 100 properties or something like that back then. And of course we were like, Sure, Lisa. And so anyway, like, that's obviously, it tested everything. And we were like driving out to the professional linen company, begging for linen, helping them bring old stock off the shelf to like service all of these new properties. I'm like pitching up at the 5-star hotels, like handing out pamphlets to housekeepers. It's just all that kind of like hustle.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I guess, like, with that business, we got a bit of traction. Everyone knows that cleaning is hard. I think it's a good place to start for a business like ours. If you're running a short-term property management business, having a cleaning foundation is useful. But doing cleaning only, which is a fee per service model, is low margin. There's high error rates. So like your cleaners will mess up, you have to refund someone, and then of course your margin's all gone. So we were like doing all this work and not making any money, and we're looking at a business like Lisa's and we're saying, hey, these guys are clipping the ticket every night that a guest is resting their head on the pillow. So that's a better business model. And so we kind of pivoted into the property management side of things. That was after about, a year or so. And then you had to kind of start again because there wasn't the same demand for short-term rental property management services in the market like there was for the cleaning services. So it was really hard to get those first few customers. In fact, I would say it was hard to get the first 200 customers, if you know what I mean. Like it took a long time for a brand to emerge and for a reputation to emerge. And so we were, again, like I just remember with Dave, we're running around we had these Vespers in Sydney because the traffic's bad. And we'd run around to
just for efficiency. And because you thought you looked cool, right?
Exactly. So look, for those that are in the US, we had a Craigslist equivalent called Gumtree, and people would be self-managing their investment property. They would list it on there as a home open on the weekend, and we'd rock up and pitch the homeowner short-term rentals, hey, don't rent this place out for long-term. This is a great Airbnb.
Wow. Really? Wow.
So that's a slow way to grow your business if that's the hot tip.
Wow. Yeah, but critical, right? When I started iBooked Online, when we started selling websites, I took all the skills I had from all my sales positions in the past. First thing, needed a database, needed a list of people to contact. So I knew that if I do it myself, it's going to take me forever. So I did get some freelancers to help build some lists out. Then I knew that I needed a CRM, put it all into CRM. And then I was just calling people, literally. And I was like, I'll target them geographically because then if I drive out, then I can go and see a few of them at the same time. I remember turning up to the first appointment and going, "Oh yeah, we did these amazing websites," and I'm like, "Jesus, I hope this is all gonna work itself out." And worst case scenario, if I can't deliver, then I'll have to beg for forgiveness. But I'm confident that I can deliver on the product. But it was literally going out and one by one, just calling them. And I would argue that that's actually quite an effective way to sell. And people have got a little bit lazy with expecting social media to bring in leads, and then you put them through a lead funnel, and then there's no interaction, that sort of thing. I know for a fact that I've recommended it to anyone. Like if I was to pick up the phone for a day and make phone calls, I would make sales. I know for a fact. I just need a good enough list. I think same with property management. Do you reckon that that's a thing?
100%. I couldn't agree more, in fact. And so I would say you're, at least from your sales experience, you're at level 3 or level 5. We're level 1 because we didn't start with the list. But if you've got the list, then get going, build those personal relationships. And it's when you're B2B, which you are selling the websites, right? The relationship matters a lot. And even though we are B2C, it's more like a B2B relationship just because the importance of the transaction to a customer to who's going to manage their property, which is either their greatest or their second biggest asset that they have. It's important. So you're not gonna win them over from an ad or an email or one of those things. So you've got to have the conversations, and I think honing in the conversation to be highly effective and important is the next step, right? Once you've got the list and you can speak to people, actually conveying your business and your credentials and all that kind of stuff. And actually, I've learned from our head of sales recently, he goes, do you know what? The longer you keep someone on the phone, the more likely they are to convert and to bring them over. So even if you just think of it as that simply, just get on for a good old chat.
It's 100% correct. I will address that because you don't know this about me. My sales career started, I had online businesses and stuff, but my sales career started by selling a jaffle iron that you put on a hot plate. So you put 2 pieces of bread in and baked beans in the middle and some cheese, and then you put it on the hot plate. And I was at these trade shows, and the item's worth £15. This was in the UK, and the demo was maybe 10 minutes. Then I started selling blenders, so a Vitamix blender at sort of £400, right? And the Vitamix blender, the demo was, I think, between 20 minutes and 40 minutes, depending on how you're going. Okay. So you need more time to convince them to buy at a higher price point. There's no way you could do it in a 5-10 minute demo. And then there were demos that we would do an hour and 20 because they just hadn't bought. And it's like, all right, you just keep them going. I'll give up, or they're convinced. Oh, of course. And it's a really interesting one. But
dude,
I want to go back because these episodes are relatively time constrained because we want to get a lot of info out to people so they can really use it practically in their businesses and their lives. When you start the first business and you're in your corporate attire or having your beer, you're stressed out at work, and then you've got an idea, which is there's a sharing economy. Okay, let's service the sharing economy. We're going to go and do the cleaning within that particular niche as well. I mean, having a cleaning company was nothing new at the time. And it's a clear we're solving a problem type situation. How did you know that I mean, apart from going, yeah, it's obviously a problem, how did you know there was really a problem? And how did you know that this was actually going to be a business that's going to generate some sort of revenue, right? Or do well? And what was that sort of thought process, and then maybe even quitting the job to do that and help out like whoever's actually in that situation going, all right, how do I think about setting up a business? Because I think people do really struggle with that concept.
With taking the leap. Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. So we were avid Airbnb users before we just, whilst we're at corporate jobs. And the beauty was, and this is why Airbnb it grew so quickly into those like urban markets, right? And disrupted the urban accommodation markets first, is because you had people paying high levels of rent in New York or Barcelona or Sydney. And those people are motivated to sweat their assets, right? Like if I'm going on a holiday somewhere and I'm paying $1,000 a week for my apartment, I'm really motivated to see if I can put it on Airbnb and get someone to cover the rent while I'm away. So that's how Dave and I kind of first experienced Airbnb. Then, and this is where Dave actually was useful in our relationship. I mean, very not to
Not that he's not useful anymore, but
he had that like financial analyst kind of brain, right? So then he's like, oh wow, this is super interesting. Let me look into Airbnb. Like, found out the kind of growth rates of the company. Was like, wow, it's a global phenomenon. This is kind of like it's almost like a new emerging, both a travel trend, but then also this whole sharing economy trend. Off the back of Uber, make money from your property whilst you're not there, etc. So that was a couple of big like macro trends or shifts that were then going to create some kind of like vacuums for services or other kind of business opportunities, I guess, around it. So we were like, oh wow, isn't it a pain having to like rent your Airbnb out while you're away? You can't get anyone to clean the property for you, let alone bring the sheets. Like that's the hardest part. Even asking someone to clean or finding a clean part, then you got to get the sheets. That's hard. So we could solve that. That was clearly a problem. But then when you wrapped it around with some of the other kind of shifts in the market, what Uber was doing, the direction Airbnb was going in, that was probably what gave us the confidence to like, do you know what? Like if we're going to quit our jobs and roll the dice and give ourselves, say, 6 or 12 months to make it work, they were the kind of macro tailwinds that at least gave you some confidence that, there would be a growth opportunity in that space. The flip side, if you ask me right now to kind of leave my job and go start up a call center in the face of an AI headwind, that's not something we're going to do. At that time, there was enough kind of there was enough sort of signals in the market that there would be demand there. And then look, what the impetus was actually to finally quit was Dave got married in Zimbabwe. I went to Africa and experienced as an Australian kid where the institutions work, the universities work. You leave uni, you get a career job. This is what everyone does. You get a mortgage, then you're stuck with your career job forever. Over in Africa, everyone's an entrepreneur. There is no kind of institutions. There's not the kind of infrastructure around it. So everyone over there is an entrepreneur. So after that, I came back and was like, holy moly, like if these guys are creating opportunities out of thin air over there, we can surely do it here. So that was like, quit the job. And we both quit our jobs within like a month of each other. And then we just pitched up in my house and we started building a website, and like neither of us were technical. So that was a challenge. So then we had to go and find technical help. And that's where we pulled our savings and, found some people to build the website and do that kind of stuff for us. And that's obviously a learning curve as well. You get some challenging personalities in the business and all that kind of jazz.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the getting the right people in the right place at the right time for the right budget is I guess the one of the biggest challenges as a business owner, and you're probably still facing it every single day. And then you get an HR person, everything should get solved. But I love that idea of the entrepreneurship. I love the idea as well of having sort of a bit of a catalyst for you. I think you already knew in your head where you wanted to go, but then you saw something external that then helped you justify it. So that's where I love to travel because generally when I go and I see new things, and why this is why I go to all these conferences, is to kind of, it's sort of like not a reality check, but a check to make sure that what I'm doing is real and that I'm going in the right direction. I'm in my, if other people can do this stuff, and I talk to some people, I'm like, well, if you can do that, I can do it too. So I get that confidence from others around me. So it's cool to hear that if you're getting that in Zimbabwe. So the cleaning business then changes, and I think where the industry was, it was completely different as well. I didn't even think about it, but the size of property management companies that you have now, they just wouldn't have existed at the time. It would have been a lot more, just working with individual homeowners and that sort of thing. So a lot more of a complicated business, where now you could probably do it in an easier way. But then, okay, so then you decide to go to the property management side. You see that that's a great opportunity, and you start to pick up a few properties. You set it up to 200. It was really difficult to get there. But you had a massive advantage over everyone else because you already had a good understanding of the industry. And you saw there was a bigger financial opportunity, but also with the cleaning, you're kind of solving a really obvious problem. But I think with property management, especially 10 years ago, it's really hard to sort of explain to people what the problem really was and to put it into their mind. Tell me about that part of your journey, those first months, years. How quickly did it all go?
Slowly. So I think we actually experienced more growth with the cleaning business than we did with the property management business in the early days. So like we were getting a strong feedback signal with the cleaning business that like that was a clear demand of the market, but the business model was challenging. So then we kind of optimized for the business model. And obviously with the property management, it's a commission on the fees that are going through the property plus the cleaning fees at the end. And nowadays we have booking fees and other kind of sources of margin. But we optimized for the business model, but then ran into this kind of growth challenge. As you said, all the businesses were small back then. Airbnb was growing, and you had a lot of self-managed hosts. Like they would do it themselves. They would eventually get fatigue, and then they would look for a solution. But that wasn't by any means like a torrent of customers. So it was actually really slow going at the start, and we found it easier to grow in. We got more leads, if you will, from like Google and the website from urban locations. So Sydney, and then we started getting leads in Melbourne. And this was all people that were signing up to Airbnb, running Airbnb for a period of time, getting fatigue, and then often reaching out to us for cleaning solutions. And then we would have to sell them on the full management and say, hey, we can actually do it all for you, et cetera, et cetera. And we did that. We offered them in parallel for a while. And this is like the, what do you call it? The prisoner's dilemma, like where you don't want to cannibalize. Right. Yeah, so we're offering cleaning and property management. A lot of people just wanted the cleaning, but we didn't want to kill the cleaning side of the business because that was going to hurt our revenues. But we had to do that at some point because we just said, hey, no, you can't get the cleaning solution. You only get the property management solution, sort of thing. And yeah, honestly, like people, on these, if you listen to other success stories, sometimes it sounds like we launched a product and bang, there was just such a clear demand for it and we were away and we experienced hockey stick growth. And that certainly wasn't Hometime's experience. It was kind of like hard fought, slow kind of incremental growth. A lot of time spent, Dave and I staring at the ceiling going, how can we actually systematically kind of grow the business? We didn't have money to spend on big Google ads. There wasn't really any Google traffic back then, right? Now if you
for these particular search terms, right?
Yeah, for like Airbnb management, Airbnb property management, which now everyone pays Google like $100 and $160 a click, for that keyword. There was just like if you went to SEMrush, there's like 20 searches a week in the whole of Australia. So like, what are you going to do with that? Yeah. What we did was we responded to those leads into other cities. So I guess relatively early, probably around that 200 property mark, we expanded from Sydney into Melbourne and into the Gold Coast at basically the same time. And that was looking at Uber and those like a DoorDash or an Uber. They had this like city manager model where they go and hire a city manager in one of those cities, and they would have to basically be like, they're like entrepreneurs. They just start the business from scratch down there. So I moved to Melbourne for a period of time, and we rented. You literally go and rent someone's garage because you're not going to put money into like a proper warehouse. Rent someone's garage, fill it with linen, do a flyer drop around the place for some property management services. We used to hit the the cities, like the financial district of Sydney and in Melbourne, and hand out flyers, like hoping that these people had investment properties. And so it was really
Where are the rich people?
exactly. And like poor Dave, he actually like worked in the financial district of Sydney, so he's there like on a Hometime T-shirt, handing out flyers, and it's like his ex managers and bosses are like, "Mate, you sure this is
What
a
are you
good
doing?
decision?" Anyway, like so that was it was just really hard fought at the start. We slowly started getting to traction. We built the business. This is like 2016, 2017, 2018. We built it up to about, I think, 600 properties between Sydney, Melbourne, Gold Coast. And at that point, we went and raised some like venture capital. So that's also like a pretty important turning point for the business, which is getting funded. And you know, without kind of going down the rabbit hole of whether you should go and get funding or not, it was just that we were of the age where we were like young, ambitious. We didn't have kids or families at the time. We could afford to kind of just go all in. And so we said to ourselves, let's go get some funding for the business, and it'll just force us to kind of make this something big. Like it'll just want to go big or go home. Like that aligns with us. So let's go. And so then that was an interesting experience because we hadn't done that before. And I was putting together a pitch deck and going around and literally just presenting to different VCs that we could get a meeting with. And of course, that went horribly for the first like 20 or 30. And then eventually...
no one would have understood it, I can imagine, back then as well.
And like, you know, people are pitching SaaS businesses and we're kind of pitching like property management. It's like really not sexy. It doesn't sound scalable. And so, of course, we got a lot of no's. The guys that actually accepted was a firm called APCL in Sydney. And I remember Dave and I were late for the meeting and we're on our scooters because, of course, like, you know, it's cheap and easy to get around. And we rock up to the meeting and Dave's like, mate, you got the pitch decks? And I was like, I think so. And I open up the back of my scooter and there's this one pitch deck. So we go into this like level 35 boardroom of some building in the city of Sydney, and then like, you know, big mahogany table, and we like give them one small pitch deck, which is like half an A4. So we're all crowded around this thing, and we flipped through. Anyway, we managed to get a bit of investment from them, and they've been really good supporters of the business. Martin's been our chairman, you know, ever since, and that's been great from a governance perspective. But that actually forced, I guess, a level of like rigor and reporting in the business. So it's like when you take someone's money, you now got to deliver growth, right? And so we ended up on, you know, weekly and monthly calls with these guys reporting on growth figures. And back then it's like, yeah, we signed up 3 people, you know, this month. So yeah, it was kind of early days. But that sort of with that money, I guess, that we brought into the business, we're able to spend a bit more on growth. So particularly around some additional hires, investing in the software, and spending much more aggressively on Google and advertising, right? That's where a lot of that money went. Grew the business in 2019. I think we added about 200 homes. So we went from sort of like 600 to 800, which is quite steep growth. And then we ran into COVID. So that's like the next chapter. But that was like at this point in time, maybe it's worth touching on. The business model was still, like you said before, centrally managed. So we were headquartered in Sydney. We had housekeeping operations in Melbourne and the Gold Coast, but we were running it all out of Sydney, and we were experiencing, I guess, that decline in service that you get with scale, particularly with geographic distance from HQ, right? So it's really hard to uphold service standards. And so we had question marks, you know, like, how are we going to solve the quality thing?
But before we go into this part, because I think we need to stop for a second, because I think it's very, very misunderstood. I think this industry as a whole, at the level of complication that there is in managing a business remotely. And I remember even like 4 or 5 years ago, people still saying, "Oh, you can manage your business from one location and have your, you know, just do Airbnbs everywhere because it doesn't really matter." And it's further from the truth. I mean, the reason why hotels do so well is because they've centralized everything, and you can have head office that does all the accounting and whatever and distribution and that sort of stuff. But the team on the ground is the one that makes it all happen, that weaves the magic. And without them, I mean, you've got to get the linen into the property, right? You can't just rely on people that you don't really know very well, you haven't seen face to face, to do it. And I think that there was a perception maybe 6-7 years ago in the industry that you could pull it off. But now I think it's like it's not going that way, and people are like, oh, you can't really do it. So yeah, give me your thoughts on that part, because I guess you're a lot closer to it than I am, and I'm just going with hearsay and what I've seen throughout the industry. What were your thoughts on the ground with that sort of those models, and can it still be done potentially?
Well, I think what you've seen in the industry is the proof that it requires local presence. And so, you look at a business like Vacasa, right, which, raised 1.6 billion and bought all these property management portfolios and then consolidated it centrally. And whilst there's definitely synergies in that, and yes, you can get good distribution and your software costs and all those kind of things make sense. Ultimately, you got to think about like, what does the customer want, right? And if you own a investment property or a holiday home, you don't want to call your property manager who sits 1,000 miles away, who's never been to that property, never seen it, doesn't really care about it, answering your phone call telling you it's all going fine. Like, that's just fundamentally not how it works. So, like, what does the customer want? The customer wants someone who cares about their property, who looks after their property, maintains it. First and foremost, that's in my opinion, like number one. They just don't want their property neglected. Second, they want to make money off it. There's got to be some financial return. So that's where like some of the centralization and smarts and sophistication industry is useful. But unless you have the first piece, you can't do the second piece. So my view on this is entirely that it's a hyperlocal business. It's an industry that needs to be built on local relationships, and that you're never going to get away. And Australia at least has this interesting dynamic where we don't have like businesses that own large portfolios of homes. So the 99% of holiday homeowners or property investors in Australia have one investment property, sorry. And so you're dealing with, it's a one-to-one type of relationship. Mm. And so that person has their primary house, they have one investment property, and they care equally about both of them. So, and in the US, it's the same. There's a bit more like, corporates do have multifamily units over there. But for most of your audience listening to this podcast, if you manage 50 properties, you've probably got 50 clients, or you might have 48 clients, but it's not like you have 5 or 6 clients. So I think fundamentally, knowing that your end user, your customer being the property owner, has only got one of these, and it matters a lot to them. They care about the relationship, and that relationship is stronger if there's a local presence. Like, I just don't think you get away from that. And to wrap it back to Vacasa, that's why you're seeing Casa Go, which is a franchise business model, which has a local business owner in every market. That's why they're winning. So I think the proof's in the pudding.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. So when you were scaling, because obviously you've done acquisitions and then you centralized a whole bunch of it. And what we're talking about right now, was that always your point of view, or has it changed through time?
Yeah, it changed. So yeah, through this period before COVID, we were scaling, but doing it centrally. We were seeing the kind of decline in service quality, and we were scratching our heads as to like, how do you maintain the quality of service whilst also planting flags in the ground? Because so after we take investment, the whole like ambition changes. It's like, cool, how can we become the national leader for short-term rental property management, right? National leader means you got to operate in like many, many cities and towns. So then all of a sudden you're like, well, how can we operate in many cities and towns whilst maintaining service quality? Because if you don't have service quality, you have high churn. And then if you have high churn, you don't have a business, basically. So we were kind of toying with the idea of essentially using local service delivery partners, essentially. Like, this is again with the Uber kind of concept, where they would have their own business and we would basically give them a portion of our portfolio to manage the on the ground local services, and we'd enter into a revenue share with them. So we were toying with this idea because that would allow us to kind of find a local service delivery partner in a market that was subscale and sub-economic. And then they would be putting their skin in and we'd be putting our skin in, we'd grow it together, and they end up with a business, and so do we, right? And then COVID was the catalyst. So we were at about 800 properties. COVID hit. We had a large, I guess, fixed cost base servicing those properties. And of course, our revenues went through the floor. So what we ended up doing was we offered all of our property managers, we had property managers in the Gold Coast, in Melbourne, in Sydney. We said, hey guys, if you want to spin up a business here, we will give you a portion of the portfolio. We will give you this revenue share to do the on the ground portion of the services. And that's actually what happened. So we had probably 2/3 of our property managers take us up, and they all got given a relatively small portfolio, like maybe 20 or 30 homes. And that was the seed of their business kind of thing. And so we had, in Sydney, we had 6 hosting partners now, and they were, through COVID, right, they were managing the properties, but they were also cleaning the properties because that was a source of income and revenue for them. And then, as they started to grow, they were growing their businesses. So we ended up being kind of like a business in a box for hospitality entrepreneurs, where they could come, get gifted a portfolio of homes, get gifted this, like it all ran on our systems. So the systems, the processes, everything was there. We just need someone who was actually incentivized, who would make the profits from that, and grow it with us. And that honestly, we had some challenges, I guess, through figuring out what the right delineation of responsibilities for like central services versus local and all that kind of stuff. But I would say in a nutshell, that has been Hometime's single reason for success. Like that's our secret sauce, is this kind of now the business model, which is it's the Hometime brand and it's the Hometime software and it's the Hometime kind of specialist services at the middle, which brings this trust and sophistication for the end user, the homeowner. But it's really in partnership with our local hosting partners, who are local hospitality entrepreneurs who care a lot about the experience of the guests, who care about these properties, who have skin in the game, who are building their businesses. And that combination is what results in a good experience for the homeowner and the guest ultimately. So yeah.
It's a real example of something that I've been toying with for a long time, is that the STR industry is it's super new. People think that it's been around forever. And yes, renting out your home is not a new concept or a new idea. But what we're doing, we're innovators, we're pioneers in figuring out how we do things. And there's no set precedent as to how to do it. Even from a regulation point of view, we're still trying to figure that out as a community, as communities across countries, across different regions. We're trying to figure out how this is all meant to work and for all stakeholders to be looked after along the way. So it's really interesting, the change of one business model to the next. And this is the one that really feels right, especially right now in the way that you do things, and more understanding as to how it should work. Now, businesses typically, they want to have control though, right? When you don't have control, you've got leakage of revenue and money, and a lot of things can kind of go wrong. But then you take a franchise model like McDonald's, and they figure that thing out, how to run a franchise in a really good way. So it is achievable. But I imagine that when you guys are doing the switch, it would have been pretty confronting, both personally, to your teams, your partners, your wives, and also to your investors, to saying, hey, we need to adjust here because we're not, one, obviously COVID might have been that catalyst, and you might have said, well, we just did it because of that. So maybe it wasn't because, because it was the right thing to do. It was just because of the time. But what was that discussion like, going, hey, we're going to try to give up some control and give up some of our margin as well? That would have been pretty confronting.
Yeah, super. So of course, and, it's a different world now, to be honest, from an investor's perspective in the capital markets. But back then, it was revenue multiples, right? You guys are a tech-enabled services business. You're growing revenues really fast. And now you're going to basically go and give away, and I don't mind sharing, but we share 50% of the management fee with the local host, and they get all the cleaning fee. So that's a big chunk of revenues, right? And you give that up in order to solve the scalability and the service quality issues, right? But yeah, it was a huge decision to make, and it also took quite a bit of convincing of investors and that kind of stuff to because they're obviously worried about, well, hang on a second, you've just gone and slashed your real revenues by that means the valuation multiple gets slashed by half. And now, what does that mean for all of us? And I guess it was, in some respects, although it was super challenging and chaotic, if you look back, COVID was a useful catalyst, because without COVID, I don't know that we would have been able to kind of get that kind of conversation over the line. But there was a deck that got circulated to a bunch of startups, which was from the 2008 GFC crisis, which was it was like the cut costs or die, that avoid the death spiral, like, you know, and that landed on our inbox, and it was like March of 2020, and it's like, all right, well, if there's ever an event that you need to, like, it's stay alive is the name of the game, then this is it. And so with that kind of mentality, it's hard, because obviously we laid off a lot of our team as well. Like, we probably laid off maybe 40% of the business at that time. Then other people that were previously, joined a startup to be like a city manager, in an Uber style kind of environment. Next things up, there are property managers, and they're cleaning showers, to through COVID. So, like, yeah, it was a pretty violent change to the business. But the ones that, I guess what's cool, if I look back on that now, the people that kind of came with us and we got through that together, that really formed like the nucleus of what the business is today, because they're the ones that have, they showed the grit. They've been through the kind of times when it was really trying. And that also helps to build the culture quite a bit of the business. So you have like quite a good service culture at the center of Hometime, thanks to that period of time. But yeah, anyway, like, I guess then what happened through COVID, well, what the benefit of this was, is we now, instead of one centralized business, we became, I can't remember how many at the time, but call it 30 decentralized businesses. And whilst we couldn't do a whole lot of growth through those COVID years, just because of the nature of border closures, opening, closing, when the market reopened again, we were really well positioned to capitalize on that boom, because everyone's wanting to travel now. Sure. Everyone's wanting to put their property on the short-term rental market. And instead of like one central sales team trying to deal with all this demand, exactly. And their businesses, let's just say they grew from 20 properties to 40 properties each, like really, really quickly.
Overnight, yeah.
And that was really cool. Yeah.
Like the foresight, right? If you had known, then you definitely would have done it, right? And I think a lot of people got really lucky. And I think that we're really interesting as well to see over the next, there's going to be different iterations of changes and things happening, and you guys will need to keep changing as you grow and as you move forward to adapt and keep on adjusting. But look, I feel like we're halfway through the story. There's just so many questions I have around, for example, the investment, the acquisitions that you guys are making, team building, culture. We definitely got another hour or two in this episode without a problem. But I think as an intro, that's been a really useful piece. And what I might do is I might make you commit to getting back on before the end of the year to do another episode with me.
Yeah.
To talk a bit deeper on a few different topics, maybe from this one. I really want to do the acquisition type episode and talk about that and how people can exit their businesses and how they can think about that. We also need to talk about your relationship with Dave, and what that means as a founder and a co-founder, and whether it's a good thing or bad thing. Obviously, you guys got to where you are. So, unfortunately, though, we are gonna wrap. So, Billy, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing a really in-depth part of your journey and your story. And it's been really great to get some revelations about your philosophy and how you see things. I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways is the grit part. And that part, the first part, was really the best for me, is just going, yep, this is what you have to do. And I think anyone out there is really looking to get started, it is that grit. And then the other part is really figuring out what problems you're actually solving, which obviously Billy and Dave did. And then you can just tell throughout the whole story that you guys were working it. So folks, if you are tuned into the podcast on iTunes, make sure you leave us a review. If you're watching on YouTube, then hit that subscribe button. It does make a significant difference in our ability to produce these episodes and to get incredible guests like Billy onto the show. Billy, thank you so much. Are there any final words that you have for our audience?
Not at all. I would love to come back and continue the story with you, Bart. I think, what would I say to anyone building a short-term rental business? I think it's really just always going to feel hard until the point that it doesn't feel hard anymore, and it will come. And I think whether that's 20 properties, 50 or 100, there becomes a point where, like, you look back behind you and you go, oh wow, this actually just got a bit easier. And that last 10 properties or 20 properties came without the same sort of hard graft as the first few. So, and even for those that are running 100, like, getting to 150 is a similar kind of feeling. So I would just suggest that focus on quality, focus on your operations, free yourself up to grow. We can talk about this in a following episode. But in terms of Hometime, or if you're interested you're in Australia and connecting, we are buying businesses and doing that kind of stuff. So you can catch me on LinkedIn at like William Crock, or via the Hometime website. We've got 1,000,001 contact details on there. So, but yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Bart. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it as well. Look, take care. Have a good rest of the day. And I'm sure we'll see each other sooner rather than later.
Thanks, mate.